There's a question, says question to Michael. And the question is, Sadhu Om is considered to be one of the most celebrated devotees of Bhagavan. I have read a few of the works of Sadhu Om and recently came upon Sadhanai Saram. I must say reading it has helped me greatly in the practice of self-attention. Coming to my question, could you talk about the last days of Sadhu Om, Swami? I have read somewhere that Sadhu Om had to go through some serious health issues during the last days of his life. When Bhagavan, who is infinite love, can allow this to happen to Sadhu Om, who has surrendered to Bhagavan completely, then we normal people whose devotion has not matured don't have a chance in escaping the bad karma we did. What is this infinite love of the self when you have to go through suffering, if you have to go through suffering any which ways? This has always been very hard for me to understand.
Okay. If we, from our perspective, it seems that even Bhagavan had to undergo suffering. That is, Bhagavan had an extremely painful cancer, sarcoma. It was actually a tumor growing on the nerve in his arm. So it was extremely painful. But that's only from our point of view, because we take Bhagavan to be the body. Bhagavan is not the body. Because we mistake ourselves to be the body, we mistake him to be the body. But he is that which is always shining in our heart as I. So when we have surrendered ourselves fully to Bhagavan, we no longer remain as a separate entity. So though in the view of others we may still be a person, we have lost ourselves in Bhagavan. So for those who, if we truly surrender ourselves to Bhagavan, we need not worry about the prarabdha of this body. That is, for the jnani, there is no prarabdha. The prarabdha is only for the body, which is not what the jnani is, because the jnani is as Bhagavan often used to say, jnana me jnani. The jnana alone is the jnani. And what is the nature of jnana? It is Satchidananda. So for the jnani, there is no suffering. The jnani means one who has surrendered themselves completely. Once we surrender ourselves completely, we cease to, we are no longer a separate self. We have merged into that source, and therefore we are infinite happiness. There's no such thing as misery. So when Bhagavan had cancer, and people asked him, Bhagavan, is there not pain? Bhagavan said, yes, there is pain, but it's not other than me. Because in his view, what actually exists is only I am. So if at all there's any world, or at all there's any body, or at all there's any pain or pleasure or anything, it's all only I am. So what we see as all these phenomena, he sees only as I am. If we are walking with Bhagavan along a dark path in the dark or in dim light, and we see something on the path which we take to be a snake, Bhagavan sees clearly that it's a rope. What Bhagavan is seeing is exactly the same as what we are seeing. But whereas we are seeing it as a snake, he is seeing it only as a rope. Likewise, Bhagavan is seeing all that we are seeing, but he is not seeing it as a multitude of names and forms of pleasure and pain and so many other things. He's seeing it only as the infinite and indivisible ocean of Satchidananda. So for the true devotee, there is no such thing as suffering. Suffering may be there for the body, but the body is just jada, so we need not be concerned about the body. Coming to Sadhu Om, he did have some health issues, but he actually was in relatively good health, apart from, he had blood pressure. In India, generally they refer to blood pressure as BP. And he used to jokingly say, BP is very good, because BP means Bhagavan's protection. And as a result of this BP, we'll be here one day and next day we'll be gone. We'll be no trouble for ourselves and no trouble for others. And that's actually what happened in his case. We all went for Giri Pradakshina one evening. And when we returned, after eating our evening meal, we all went to bed. And the next morning, we found him. He had had a stroke. We took him to Jipma Hospital in Pondicherry. That day, that night he was in Jipma Hospital. The doctors did tests and things, and by the next day, the doctors came and told us that but he'd had a stroke, and so the brain was flooded with blood, and they said it's just a matter of time. So they said, it's up to you. If you want to keep him here, we'll take care of him. But we knew that he wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere but in Tiruvannamalai. And there was also another doctor there who wasn't working in the hospital, but he was had been I think the district medical officer or something, and he was a devotee of Bhagavan, and he knew Sadhu Om. So he came, and he told us this is what the doctors have said. So we asked for his opinion whether he thought anything could be done. He said no. So we decided to take him back to Tiruvannamalai. So I think it was on the 14th that we give the Giri Pradakshina. That night he had the stroke. So the night of the 15th he was in Jipma Hospital. 16th we brought him back to Tiruvannamalai, and then he lived upstairs in another house, but we decided to put him on a bed in my house, because my house it was a very small house. It had the door looked directly out at the hill, so we placed him on a bed inside the main room of my house, facing towards the hill. And I remember myself and another friend, we went to the local, the Dr. Subrayan, who was the local doctor, and we asked his advice about drip and everything. He said, he looked at the medical report, he said, if you give the drip, you may extend his life for a few more days or even a few more weeks, but you're only extending the suffering. There's no point in continuing, was his advice. So we came back and we removed the drip and everything. And it was very clear from all the signs that the life was slowly ebbing from his body. So the whole of that night of the 16th, we sat up with him and we were all singing Aksharam and everything. And one of the times while we were singing Aksharam, his breathing pattern changed, and very slowly, the breathing became slower and slower. And the final, generally, the last breath will be a breath out. But it is said that in the case of jnanis, the prana merges back into the heart, so the final breath will not be a breath out. And that's what we could observe in his case. He just took one breath in and that was it. And that was while we were singing Aksharam. So actually, because he was virtually in a coma. I mean, I think he was, when the doctors looked at him in Pondicherry, they said he won't be aware of anything, but we could see by signs that he was aware. For example, when we started singing Aksharam, we could see from the expression on his face that he was very happy that we were singing. And so it all happened within 3 days. It was very unexpected because he was relatively young. He was just 63 years old. It was a great shock to all of us who were close to him, because we never expected that. Even though he had been saying, as I say, he was often saying about BP. It's Bhagavan's protection, and one day we'll be here, next day we'll be gone. It won't be a trouble to us or to anyone else. That's actually what happened. It was he left in a way without troubling anyone. And some 2 years before, one day when some friends were talking, they were talking about the sons of one of them, and they said he's he's in +2. That is in India, after finishing the school, then you have +1, +2, and then you go to university. So +2 means it's it's the second year of pre-university. So when they said, when one of them said about one of the sons of one of them, he's in +2, Sadhuam said, and I'm in -2. At that time, we none of us really thought much about it. We thought he's just joking. But true enough, 2 years later, he left the body. And very well, for us, it was unexpected. It was only in retrospect we thought, oh, he had warned us earlier by saying, I'm in -2. And the only changes that seemed to take place from the last day or two before that stroke, he seemed to be very withdrawn. While going round the hill, usually while going round the hill, we will all, as usual, will sing Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, and often me or others, we would be, I would be, well, it was usually me, I'd be questioning him, talking about Bhagavan's teachings, and he would be answering. But for some reason that day, I noticed he was very withdrawn, and it was very difficult to talk him into, draw him into any conversation. But I mean, that was only a slight difference. I mean, we came back and we had food, and there was something he said just before. The last thing I heard him say, I've forgotten now what it was. Something significant, just when I was taking leave to go to bed, and he said something, but I've forgotten now what it was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If it were important, I'd remember it. But it seemed to be significant at the time. So it was actually, he, relatively speaking, he suffered very little from, but of course, as I say, all these things, it's all according to, it's all from our point of view. We see him as a person, and so it seems to us he suffered an illness, just like it seems to us Bhagavan suffered cancer, whereas of course Bhagavan didn't suffer anything, because he himself is the infinite ocean of happiness. Regarding about us, what about us? That is, when we take a body, suffering in one form or another is inevitable. That is, our real nature is infinite happiness. So we cannot be satisfied with anything other than infinite happiness. But so long as we rise as ego, we have limited ourselves to the extent of this body. We are limited in time. This body was born one day and it's going to die one day. We're limited in space. We're here, not there. So we're limited in so many ways by rising as ego. So as this finite ego, we can never experience infinite happiness. So the nature of ego is to be always dissatisfied. That dissatisfaction, that is what is called dukkha. Sukha is the infinite satisfaction, the infinite happiness that we actually are. Dukkha is the dissatisfaction. Why our mind is always going out, seeking this or that, or because we are always discontented. We always feel something is lacking. Because until we lose ourselves in the infinite ocean of happiness that we actually are, we will always feel a deficiency. Because we feel a deficiency in ourselves, we seek it outside. But what we are seeking outside is not outside, it's only within. That happiness that we are seeking in things other than ourselves lies only in ourselves. So the suffering is inevitable for all of us. And as far as prarabdha is concerned, prarabdha is the fruit of our past actions. But it's not just any fruit of a past action. As Bhagavan says in the first verse of Upadesha Undiyar, karmam payantara kartanadanaya. Karma gives fruit according to as per the ordainment of God, as per the allotment of God. That is, once we do any action, the fruit of that action is no longer in our hands. It is then in the hands of God. It is God who decides what is the appropriate fruit for each action, and when, where, and how and in what form we should experience that fruit. So having done a karma, the karma is out of our hands. When you shoot an arrow from a bow, you know, so long as before you shoot it, you can aim it here or there. Once you've shot it, you have given up control over it. So whichever direction the arrow goes in, it's going to go in that direction. We can't change it at all. So when we've done an action, the fruit is in the hands of God. So in the hands of Bhagavan. So the fruit of all our past actions, they're in Bhagavan's hands. They're very, very safe. He will give us the fruit in such a way that will be most beneficial to us. So even if we have to suffer in some way or other, of course we all have to suffer in one way or other, that suffering is only for our spiritual benefit. So we should not be concerned about suffering. We should not be concerned about karma. We should not be concerned about the fruits of karma. What we should be concerned about, what is the cause of karma? Bhagavan says in verse 2 of Upadesha Vinayam vilevu vilevutru. That is, the fruit of karma passes away. That is, if whatever we are now experiencing is the fruit of our past karma. So for each karma, there is a fruit. Once you experience the fruit, the fruit is finished. You can't experience the same fruit twice. If you have a mango, if you eat your mango today, you can't eat it again tomorrow, because once you've eaten it, it's finished. Likewise with the fruit of karma. When we experience the fruit of karma, that fruit is finished. So that's why he says the fruit of karma passing away. And then he says, Viktai vinekadal virtidam. Viktai means a seed. What makes us fall in the ocean of action is seeds. The seeds means vasanas. We should always understand that seeds in this context mean vasana. To make it very clear in the Malayalam version, he said, vasanakara viktai. The seeds in the form of vasanas. So it's the vasanas that make us do action. That is, under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas, we are constantly doing action because we want to experience the Vishayas. We allow ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas, and any movement of our attention away from ourselves towards something else is under the sway of the Vishaya vasanas. So the very movement of our attention away from ourselves is a karma. And the karma gives fruit. So all karmas, all the agamya is the actions we do under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas. So we need not be worried about the karmas. What we need to be concerned about is not to allow ourselves to be swayed by the Vishaya vasanas. How can we avoid being swayed by the Vishaya vasanas? Only by clinging to self-attentiveness. So clinging to self-attentiveness, that should be our only concern. Clinging to self-attentiveness means we are clinging to our being. So Bhagavan's path is not a path about doing, it's a path about being. We need not be concerned about doing. Whatever actions we do, the fruit is in his hands. We can avoid doing action that bears fruit only by avoiding being swayed by our karmas, by our vasanas. We can avoid being swayed by our Vishaya vasanas only by clinging to self-attentiveness. So all we need to be concerned about is holding on to our being, not about our doing. Let doing take care of itself. Let us refrain from doing anything by holding on to being. That is, but body, speech, and mind may be active because they have to do certain actions in accordance with prarabdha. Because in order for the prarabdha to unfold, certain actions of body, speech, and mind are necessary. Those actions are actions we're made to do by God. So whether we're clinging to self-attentiveness or not, there are certain actions that this body has to do. But the actions that bear fruit are not the actions that we are made to do by God. The actions that we do under the sway of our vasana, they're the ones that bear fruit. So we shouldn't be concerned about those actions. We should be concerned only to hold on to self-attentiveness and thereby not be swayed by any Vishaya vasanas. So Bhagavan, if we come to Bhagavan's path, we should not be concerned about karma. Whatever fruit of past karmas we are given is given by him for our own good. Our only aim is not to be concerned with doing, to be concerned with being. Who am I? That is, what is my being? What am I actually? That is what we should be concerned about. But to the extent to which we hold on to our being, we are thereby surrendering ourselves. And surrendering ourselves means the subsidence of ego. To the extent that ego subsides, all action ceases, because action is done only by the ego. So let us not worry about ego, about action. Let us cling only to our being, only to I am. I am is beyond action and its fruit, because whether action appears or not, I am remains. Action, the doer of action and the experiencer of the fruit of action is ego. By clinging to I am, we are bringing about the dissolution of ego. So Bhagavan has given us the perfect remedy to karma. So let's not worry about karma. Let's take this remedy that Bhagavan has given us, and then we need not be concerned about karma at all. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question. A bit long, I'm afraid.
The next question is, it says, "Hi, Michael. First of all, thank you for all your wonderful work, which has enabled me to understand Bhagavan's teachings and to start putting them into practice. I have started on this path about 1 year ago with great enthusiasm, but I now feel a bit disheartened. It seems to me that the more I practice Atma-vichara, the worse I feel about myself, because I feel that I am getting swayed more and more by vasanas. It is starting to feel that I'm fighting a losing battle and that my will is not becoming more pure. Also, because I am more painfully aware of how bad I really am, I tend to get easily overcome by guilt and despair. I know I should patiently persevere and not worry about such things, but I am not always able to. I would love to hear your advice on this. Thank you so much." And I apologize for this long question.
No problem. That is, we are all being swayed by our Vishaya vasanas all the time. So long as our mind is very outward going, we are so interested in the external things, we don't notice how we are being swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. When we begin to follow this path of turning our attention within, then it becomes more and more clear to us how we are being, all the outward going movements of our mind are all under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas. So naturally, as we go deeper in this path, we become more and more aware, more and more painfully aware of how we so easily allow ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. Why do we allow ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas? Because our Vishaya vasanas are our likings. We like to be swayed. That is, we like to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. So this path is not a path for the faint-hearted. This is a path that requires all-consuming dedication. That is, for countless lives, for crores of janmas, we have been allowing our attention to flow outwards. And thereby we've been cultivating and strengthening these Vishaya vasanas. So we are now, when we begin this path of self-investigation, we are undoing the work of many lifetimes. The wealth of Vishaya vasanas that we have been accumulating, we are now trying to divest ourselves of all this huge wealth. If you've got huge wealth, it's not very easy to get rid of it. So we've got a huge wealth of Vishaya vasanas. We are trying to shed that wealth of Vishaya vasanas by clinging to the true wealth, which is the awareness that is shining in our heart as I. Let us not be discouraged. Sadhu Om gave a very nice analogy in this context. If you see a crescent moon, you can't see any craters in it. Even if you see a half moon, in a half moon, the craters are only very faintly seen. But as the moon gets fuller and fuller, the craters become more and more clear. Only in the full moon do you see the craters very clearly. Likewise with the mind. As the mind becomes more and more purified, we become more and more aware of the impurities. If you've got a very dirty cloth, if the whole cloth is dirty, you can't see the deeply rooted, the deeply embedded stains. if you wash the cloth once, you'll then remove the superficial dirt, then the more deeply embedded dirt will become more clear. So you have to wash it again, you have to wash it again, you have to wash it again until all the stains are removed. So how deeply rooted the stains are, you notice only by washing the cloth. Likewise, by this practice of self-investigation, we are washing the mind, we are purifying the mind. So the more we purify the mind, the more brightly the mind shines, so the more the craters in the mind are seen. Just like the craters on the moon become more visible as the moon becomes brighter. As the mind becomes purified and clarified by this practice of self-investigation, we become more and more clearly and painfully aware of all our imperfections. Read the poetry of great saints like Manikavaska, Sadhu, Murugana, Sadhuam, such people. You will see they are, or even Bhagavan. Bhagavan in Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, he says he's worst of the worst. They are not just saying that for our sake, that is what any true spiritual aspirant will truly feel themselves to be the worst of the worst. So the more we recognize how worthless we are, how unfit we are for following this path, the more fit we are for following this path, the more we're truly following this path. So, of course, Bhagavan, when he sang Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, he was reflecting in those hymns the state of mind of a very, very advanced spiritual aspirant. Of course, he had already surrendered himself completely to Arunachala. When he sang, for example, O Sutrulam Vida Dunai Kandarangida Unara Hekat Arunachala. So that this mind which wanders about the world may subside, show me your beauty. Is Bhagavan's mind wandering all over the world? No, of course it's not. But he's reflecting there the state of mind of a true spiritual aspirant. A true spiritual aspirant will feel even the slightest movement of the attention away from oneself towards something else. That is a great appaćara, a great appaćara means it's a great wrong on our part to allow our attention to move away from ourselves. So it will seem to us our mind is just always wandering around the world. Even though the mind, as the mind gets purer, the impurities become more and more clear. So it is from that perspective that Bhagavan sang Arunachal Stuti Panchakam. So as we get more and more advanced in this path, we will become more and more painfully aware of our unworthiness. But that is very good, because the more we recognize our own unworthiness, the more humble we will become, the more subsided we will become. What is the most dangerous thing for a spiritual aspirant is praise. If people start praising us, it's very, very dangerous, because there's nothing ego likes more than praise and appreciation. Bhagavan says in one verse in Uludunapadu, even though all the Vedas are at one's fingertips, even though all the worlds are an ounce of straw, if one falls a prey to the vile courtesan, the vile prostitute of flattery, of praise, it's very difficult to free oneself from servitude to her, or something to that effect. So the most dangerous thing for a spiritual aspirant is when people praise us, Bhagavan says, those who abuse us, they're our real enemies, because who are they abusing? Who are they rebuking? They're rebuking or ridiculing or speaking ill of ego, which is our enemy. Who is our number one enemy? So ego itself. So if people if people speak disparagingly of us, that is very good for us. If people praise us, that is very, very dangerous. So that's a danger that we all face. What is the greatest protection against that? That is, it will happen sometimes. People not knowing how We alone know how bad we are inside. In the eyes of others, we may appear to be, oh, he's a very great devotee and so on, but we know how unworthy we are. But by recognizing our own unworthiness, our own lack of fitness for this path, that is a great protection, because that protects us from this vile courtesan of flattery. However much people flatter us, it will not affect us if we clearly recognize how imperfect we are. So it's actually a great blessing from Bhagavan. The more we recognize our own unfitness for following this path, the more truly fit we are for following this path. So Bhagavan is protecting us by making us see how unworthy we are. Because when we see how unworthy we are, it doesn't matter how much people praise us. We know it may seem like that from their perspective, but we know the truth. We know how unfit we are, how unworthy we are of whatever praise we may receive. So this is a great blessing for us. So let us not be disheartened. Once we have started on this path, success is guaranteed. All that is required is perseverance. So long as we persevere in following this path, even if it seems to us that we're constantly failing, we keep on trying to attend to ourselves and our attention goes outwards. It seems that we sometimes we feel, I have no love at all for this self-attentiveness. What am I doing? I've come to Bhagavan. He's taught us all these things, and we are so convinced by what he says at the surface level of our mind. But deep down, we are still allowing our attention to go outwards. So we really haven't understood Bhagavan. The more we recognize that, the more we'll subside and subside and subside. And that's what subsiding is, following Bhagavan's path. Bhagavan's path is all about subsiding more and more and more. That is, the more we hold on to self-attentiveness, the more we thereby subside. And that is following Bhagavan's path. So however unworthy we may seem in our eyes, we have to just continue following this path. As Bhagavan says in the 10th paragraph of Nana, however great a sinner one may be, if instead of giving up, instead of lamenting and weeping, oh, I'm a great sinner, how can I be saved? If we are steadfast in this practice of self-attentiveness, we will surely be saved. And in the previous verse, he says, instead of giving room, without giving room to the doubting thought, is it possible to destroy so many vasanas, to remain as I actually am? It is necessary to Vida Sarupa Dhyanate Vida Pidayai Pidikavendum. It is necessary to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness. So let's not give room to feelings of guilt or unworthiness or anything. As Bhagavan said, don't even give room to the thought that one is a sinner. Hold on to self-attentiveness. That's all that is required. So let us not be discouraged by our own imperfections. However imperfect we may be, Bhagavan has drawn us to his feet. So, another nice thing Sadhu Om said. Bhagavan is the greatest doctor in the world, greatest spiritual doctor. If you go to the surgery of the greatest doctor in the world, what sort of patients will you find there? You won't find patients with cough and cold and minor ailments. You'll find only those patients whom all other doctors have given up on. If all other doctors have given up hope, then the last resort is to come to the greatest doctor. So we have come to Bhagavan because and all the other gurus have given us up as hopeless cases. So Bhagavan has taken us on. So those who are most fit to follow Bhagavan's path are those who are the most worthless cases, because he takes up, he as he says in one of the verses of Arunachaksharamlai, how can I Kodiye Tadayare Kollune Kati Konde Barba Narunachala? How can I survive after embracing you who have hoisted your flag to announce yourself as the killer of your devotee? That refers to, in old days, if someone was to do some philanthropy, if they were going to, say, feed all poor people or something, they would hoist a flag to announce on such and such a day poor people will be fed or something. So hoisting a flag is a way of announcing to do some philanthropy. So what is the philanthropy done by Arunachala? He's hoisted his flag to announce, I will kill my devotees. So Bhagavan is Arunachala in human form. So Bhagavan has hoisted his flag. Through his teachings, he's hoisted his flag to announce, but he's the killer of his devotees. So having come to him, he's not going to spare us. We can try and escape, but he's not going to leave us. We have come to the greatest doctor in the world because we are the most critically serious, the most critically ill patients. So it doesn't matter how unworthy we are, he is certainly going to save us. But as he says, we will surely, as he says in the 12th paragraph of Nana, he will surely save us and will never forsake us. Nevertheless, Guru Kartya Varipadi Tavarada Nadikabendam. It's necessary to walk unfailingly according to the path shown by Guru. So we have to do our best to be self-attentive, leave everything else to him. Our salvation is assured, but we have to do our little bit. He will take care of everything else. I hope this is a helpful answer to, the state of mind you talk about is how we all feel. We all feel our own unworthiness, but we shouldn't for that reason give up. Our unworthiness should spur us on to make us try more and more to be self-attentive, because this is the only way we can be saved.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's just that, only now I realize how much mercy Bhagavan has took on me, like when I was praying for Guru and I didn't know what to do, that he just put me and fixed me on this path, and that I could experience that clarity of self-awareness. Like I could see what kind of treasure he has shown us.
Yeah.
But still my mind goes after all these worthless things. And then why is this? Like, how wretched can I be that this is going on?
We are all in exactly the same boat. We are all the worst of the worst.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next question is regarding self-investigation, self-attention, during meditation, being aware of your awareness. I heard mentioned in Advaita and Tibetan Buddhism. Would self-investigation follow a similar principle, or is there some difference?
Yes, this is what self-investigation is all about. But the problem is, words are always inadequate. So we need to understand what is behind the words. When we, for example, if we talk about being aware of awareness, what exactly do we mean by awareness? That is, awareness is a word, but means different things in different contexts. We have awareness of the world. So are we to be aware of the awareness of awareness of the world? No, that is being aware of the world. But awareness that we have to investigate. Bhagavan called this path, he sometimes referred to it as Atma-vichara, which means self-investigation. He sometimes referred to it as Jnana-vichara. Jnana means awareness. But what awareness is denoted by the word jnana? It is only ourself. That is that fundamental awareness I am. That is the awareness we have to investigate. So we are aware of so many things, but the awareness of anything other than ourself is not real awareness, because nothing other than ourself actually exists. All other things are a mere appearance. So being aware of something that isn't real awareness. Real awareness is only the pure awareness, the awareness of our own existence, I am. That is the awareness we need to investigate. That awareness is, we ourselves are that awareness. That is, we are nothing but awareness. So the awareness we have to investigate is the awareness I am, not the awareness of anything else. So this is what this path is all about. But as I say, the trouble with it's impossible to put this adequately into language, because language is all about to describe things other than ourselves, to describe experience, to describe phenomena. That is why we have language. But this is something that is, we are not even this is not a part of investigating any phenomenon. It is not even a part of that is, we can describe it as a part of investigating the subject. We're not investigating any object, we're investigating the subject. The subject means the perceiver of all phenomena, that which is aware of all phenomena. That subject is ego. But even ego, what is ego? Ego is that adjunct mixed awareness. I am this body, I am this person, I am so-and-so. So when we're investigating, when it is said that we're to investigate ego, what is it in ego that we're investigating? We're not to investigate the adjuncts, body or mind or anything else. It's only the I am portion of ego. So actually, we are not investigating even the ego. We're investigating the reality of ego, that which underlies ego. So we are not investigating either any object or even the subject. We're investigating the reality of the subject, the I am portion. So this path of self-investigation that Bhagavan has taught us is extremely deep. So other people, that other paths may be described in similar ways, but it's a matter of this is why we need to have a very clear and deep understanding of Bhagavan's teachings, because this is what we are investigating is the subtlest of the subtle. That is, we're investigating just that fundamental awareness I am. That is what we're investigating. That fundamental awareness I am now seems to be ego because of the mixture of adjuncts. But what we're investigating is not the adjuncts, but only the essential, as Bhagavan said sometimes, the essential chit aspect of ego. So it's that essential, that fundamental awareness I am. So that is what we are to investigate. So we need to understand this clearly. This cannot, as I say, cannot be adequately conveyed in words. The words are all just pointers. But we need to see beyond the pointer to what the pointer is pointing at. That is, if someone uses their finger to point out the moon, you're not to look at their finger. You're to look, where is the finger pointing? Oh, it's pointing to the moon. Likewise, Bhagavan's teachings are pointing us in the right direction. They're pointing our attention back towards ourselves. So we need to understand what is meant by the pointers. All Bhagavan's teachings are directing our attention back to ourselves. So as far as other paths are concerned, exactly what those the teachers who have taught those paths, what they had, whether they're pointing out the same thing or not, who knows? Because it's all a matter of our understanding, how we take it. So, but what's important is what we understand, that we are to attend only to ourselves, only to I am, only to this fundamental awareness, not to the awareness of anything else. We need to withdraw our attention away from awareness of all other things and focus it on awareness of ourselves, because we are that awareness. We are not that which is aware of many things, that is ego. We are that which is aware of that which alone exists, namely I am. I hope this answered this question adequately.
The next question is, are there similarities between ego and Prakriti?
Prakriti means nature. It's a term that is used in many different contexts. In Sankhya, all phenomena are called Prakriti. So all objects, all phenomena are Prakriti. Ego is Purusha. It is that which is aware. That is the Sankhya is a dualistic system of philosophy, but it's a subject-object dualism. That is, Purusha is the subject. Everything else is Prakriti. That is objects. All phenomena, all objects. So ego is not Prakriti. Ego is Purusha, that which is aware of all objects. But the Sankhya philosophy, as I say, it's a dualistic philosophy. they think their aim is to separate the Purusha from the Prakriti. If you separate Purusha from Prakriti, all you have left is Purusha. If you separate ego from everything else, ego has nothing to hold on to, so it subsides and merges back in its source. So Sankhya, philosophically, it's a step on the road to Advaita. That is, first we need to distinguish the subject from all objects. This is what is called Drik Drisya Vibhaka. We're distinguishing the perceiver from everything that is perceived. Ego is not something that is perceived. That's Prakriti. Everything that is perceived is Prakriti. Ego is the perceiver of everything. So what is the reality of ego? The reality of ego is that mixed awareness, I am this body. Only when we're aware of ourselves as a body are we aware of other things. As Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uladunaptu, Uruvam Tanayin, Ulu Paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. We seem to be a form when we rise as ego, because the nature of ego is to always grasp a body as itself. So long as we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as a body, and consequently we're aware of other forms. If we investigate ourselves, that means not investigate the body but we take ourselves to be, investigate only that fundamental awareness I am, but adjuncts will drop off, the body will drop off, and I am alone will remain. This is what is called the subsidence of ego back into its source. When ego subsides back into its source, only the pure awareness I am remains. So in Sankhya, philosophically, it's a step on the road to Advaita. First, you need to distinguish the subject from the objects. Sankhya stops only with that. It's having distinguished the subject from the objects, it says, now I've got to separate the subject from the objects. That's the philosophy of Sankhya and the philosophy of yoga. But Advaita is much deeper, because Advaita then asks, okay, subject is different from the objects, but do the objects exist independent of the subject? No. They exist only in the view of the subject. So the subject has to turn its attention not to meditate on any objects, not to meditate on the prana or on any image or anything. We need to meditate only on the meditator, meditate only on I. When we meditate only on I, because we're focusing our attention only on I am, all the adjuncts will drop off, because the adjuncts cling to us only because we're clinging to them. When we hold on only to I am, everything else drops off. Prakriti all drops off, and then pure Purusha remains. That pure Purusha is our real nature. That ego in its purity, bereft of adjuncts, is what we actually are. It's no longer ego, it is just the pure awareness I am. So no, ego is not Prakriti. Ego is that which identifies itself with the body. The body and mind are all Prakriti, but ego itself is not the body or mind. It is the spurious I that identifies itself with the body and mind. So ego itself is not Prakriti, no. But it cannot stand without holding on to Prakriti. So the solution is to hold on only to the essential awareness I am. All the adjuncts, the Prakriti drops off, and the pure awareness alone remains.
Thank you, Michael.
The next question is, Sri Siddharameshwar Maharaj has said, and this is the quote, "The subtle body which calls itself I and which is full of desire eventually succumbs to death." And it goes on, and other gurus, including Adi Shankaracharya, make reference to the ego leaving the body when it dies. So is the phantom ego the subtle body?
Again, words mean different things in different contexts. Bhagavan sometimes refers to ego as subtle body. Towards the end of the fourth paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, "Manam epodum or stulate anusarate nitkum." That literally means the mind stands only by always going after something gross, something stula. That means what he means by stands by going after. It always attaches itself to something gross. In other words, it always holds on to a body as I. Taniyai niladu. Separately, it cannot stand. That is my ego. Here in this context, mana means mind means ego. So ego cannot stand without grasping something gross. All the 5 sheaves are gross, relatively speaking. So that's what Bhagavan, what he refers to as stulam there is as gross, it refers to all the 5 sheaves. So the mind cannot stand without holding on to these 5 sheaves. Separately, it can, the mind always stands by holding on to these 5 sheaves. Separately, it cannot stand. Then in the next sentence, the final sentence, he says, maname, that mind alone, sukshma sariram indram, Jivan endram solupade kiradu. The mind alone is called Sukshma Sarira and Jiva. So here Bhagavan is saying the mind is Sukshma Sarira. Likewise in Ulladu, in verse 24 of Ulladu, he says, Jadu Urul Nan Henadu, the insentient body does not say I. That, in other words, the body is not aware of itself as I. Satchit Udiyadu. Satchit doesn't rise. But between these two, Udalalava, Nan Ondru, Udikum Ideo. In between these two, in between the body and Satchit, something called one thing called I rises as the extent of a body. That is ego. And then he goes on to say in the next sentence, Idu Chitjaragranti. This is Chitjaragranti, Bandam, bondage. Jivan, the jiva. Nupame. Nupame is a Tamil way of saying Sukshma Sarira, the subtle body. Ahande, ego. Ichamsaram, this samsara, mind, mana, mind. So these are all different names for ego. But we need to understand that in this context, when the ego is referred to as subtle body, that has a different meaning to the subtle body. Sometimes the 5 sheaves are classified into 3 bodies. The gross body is said to be the Annamaya Kosha. Then the Pranamaya Kosha, Manamaya Kosha, and the Jnanamaya Kosha are said to be the subtle body. But their subtle body is being used in a different context, in a different sense than the sense in which Bhagavan uses it here. Because ego is not any of the 5 sheaves. It is that which but grasps all the 5 sheaves as itself, that which identifies itself with the 5 sheaves. The 5 sheaves are all jada, as he says in verse 22 of Upadeshundya. So the same word, Sukshma Sarira, is used in a different sense in different contexts. So in the context of the 5 sheaves, the Sukshma Sarira is 3 of the 5 sheaves. But in other contexts, Sukshma Sarira means only ego. When it is said, but the Sukshma Sarira is what goes from one body to another, after death, it leaves one body and it goes to another body. Sukshma Sarira there doesn't mean the three of the 5 sheaves. It means ego. It's ego that goes, and what ego takes with it is its vasanas. Its vasanas are what are called the Anandamaya Kosha, the Karana Sarira. They are the vasanas. Those vasanas are the seeds that give rise to all the other 4 sheaves, and indeed give rise to the whole world. I mean, Vishaya vasanas are the seeds for all Vishayas. So the whole world is nothing but Vishayas, phenomena. So the seeds that give rise to those are the Vishaya vasanas. So the other 4 sheaves are contained within the Karana Sarira in seed form as vasanas. So when the body comes to an end, that is, from a gross perspective, people think that the body dies and then the jiva migrates from one body and goes off and enters another body. That's a very gross way of looking at it. Deeper way of looking at it, as explained by Bhagavan, every life we have is just a dream. So the body is just a dream body. When we begin to dream, we always project a dream body, and through that dream body, we see a dream world. So the body is a part of the projection. So ego takes along with it its vasanas. It projects those vasanas as the body and the whole world. So the term sukshma sarira is used in different sense, in different contexts. What exactly that the question mentioned some Maharaj who said something. In what sense he was using subtle body, I don't know. If he understood as Bhagavan meant subtle body in the sense of ego, yes, it is ego that goes from body to body. It's not other sheaths that go from body to body, because they go only in the sense that the seeds go along with ego. The seeds are the vasanas, which give rise to everything else. I hope that is a clear answer. But when questions are asked about other teachers, other philosophies, there are so many different philosophies. The terms they use are very often very similar, but they use them in different sense. So I'm really not qualified to comment on other teachings, because I don't know in what sense, because unless you go deep into any teaching, you don't really know what sense that teaching uses different terms. So there are often many superficial similarities, because there's a similar wording is used, but sometimes the understanding behind those words is different. So it's really not very useful comparing different teachings. When that is on the spiritual path, an old analogy that is given is digging a well to find water. If you want to find water, you should choose one place, you should dig. And however much obstruction you come across, you continue digging in that place, sooner or later you'll get water. If instead of digging a deep well in one place, if you dig 5 feet here and 5 feet there and 5 feet there, you're not going to get anything. So people who read many different teachings, read a little bit about Zen, a little bit about Tibetan Buddhism, a little bit about Advaita, a little bit about Sankhya, a little bit about yoga, a little bit about Sufism, a little bit about Christian mysticism. They're just floating on the surface. We don't need many different teachings. We only need one true teaching. Bhagavan has given us a true teaching. If we follow what he has taught us, we will go deep in this and we will get the water we are seeking. Other paths we need not be, or other teachings we need not be concerned about. They may or may not be pointing at the same thing. That need not concern us.
The next question is, can we pray to Bhagavan to help some family members when they are in trouble or difficulty or sick?
You can pray to Bhagavan for anything if you want to, but does Bhagavan need our prayers? Does Bhagavan does not Bhagavan is the one who has allotted the prarabdha for all of us. So whatever difficulties we undergo, whatever difficulties anyone else undergo, not only are they known by Bhagavan, they were allotted by Bhagavan for the good of all concerned. So the wise thing to pray to Bhagavan is for the annihilation of ego. Praying to him for this or that, that's kamyata prayer. He doesn't need our prayer. That is, he doesn't need us to tell him that our friend or relative is sick and that they need his help. He knows it all. So leave it to him. He knows what is best. We are not, this is, Bhagavan's path is not a path of kamyata. It's a path of surrender. Surrender is the very opposite of kamyata. We are trying to shed everything, not to gain anything. So let us leave it all in the hands of Bhagavan. He knows what is best. So if you want to pray for anyone else, don't ask for this or that, because we don't know what's good for them. Bhagavan knows what's good for them better than we do. Just pray what is best for them. And that prayer will surely be answered, because whatever happens is what is best, because everything happens according to his will, and he will only what is best. So if at all we want to pray for others, let us pray only for what is best for them. Thy will be done. Your will is my will, in other words. So we shouldn't ask for this or that. The only truly worthy prayer is to pray for the annihilation of ego, because that is the cause of all the problems.
The next question is, how can one cope with the pain caused by the body, especially when you see your dear ones suffer and die?
This is the nature of the body. The nature of the body is suffering. This body is born, it grows up, and we undergo so many experiences, some pleasant experiences, some unpleasant experiences. We all grow old, and generally to a greater or lesser extent, we experience sickness, and one day we all die. This is inevitable. This is the nature of embodied existence. This should be a big eye-opener to us. That is, whenever we see disease or death or suffering, it should remind us this is the very nature of embodied existence. If we want to escape all these things, we need to escape embodiment. Embodiment is ego. That is, it's ego that takes itself to be I am this body. So the root cause of all this suffering, of all kind, is only ego. We cannot eradicate the egos of others, but we can eradicate our own ego by turning within. If we turn within and merge back into our source, everything else will merge along with us. So the only way to deal with all the suffering in this world, the most effective way, but the ultimate solution to all suffering is only self-investigation and self-surrender. Self-investigation and self-surrender, of course, are ultimately one and the same thing, because we cannot investigate ourselves without thereby surrendering ourselves. So this is the path Bhagavan has taught us. So the suffering we see in the world, when our own body is suffering from pain or illness, or when we see other bodies, those who are dear to us, suffering, it is very unbearable. Nobody likes to, sometimes it's better, sometimes we prefer to be suffering ourselves than to see others suffering, because it's particularly unbearable when we see others suffering. Okay, if it's ourselves, okay, we can bear with it. It's not so bad. But when we see others suffering, it's particularly unbearable. But these should all remind us, this is the very nature of embodied existence. This is the very nature of ego, to experience all these things. So let us investigate this ego and thereby surrender it completely. This is the only solution to all these things. I hope that adequately answers that question. It may not be exactly the question, the answer we're looking for, but we have to be honest with ourselves. There is no solution to embodiment other than eradicating ego, who is the one who is aware of itself as I am this body. That is, embodiment is nothing but ego.
The next question is, I used to desire money and think that the moment I would have it, I would be happy. I still like to make money, but I don't have the desire for it. Is there a difference between the character that seeks money because it thinks it will make him happy and the character that does it because it likes so?
Whatever we seek it because we think it makes us happy. So every outward going movement of our mind is in search of happiness. So if we're following this spiritual path, the strength and intensity of our desires will diminish. But we cannot overcome the desires entirely just overnight, because these desires are a sprouted form of our vasanas. The vasanas are very, very deeply embedded in us, ingrained in us. So we can only slowly weaken these vasanas. So yes, generally, if we come to the spiritual path, money will be less important to us than if we were wholly worldly. But we all like to have money because money means, firstly, money provide. In the modern day world, money is the means to providing for the basic needs of life, for food, clothing, and shelter. And if we have a bit more money, then we don't have to, it provides a bit more, it provides at least the illusion of security. If I've got lots of money in the bank, then I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm secure. I'm ready for whatever troubles life may throw at me. But if I have a heart attack the next minute, my money is of no use to me at all. So the money is that is the security we get from money or from material possessions is a very illusory security. It's not a real security at all. So naturally, as we go deeper in the spiritual path, the concern about money and these things may not drop off entirely, but it will diminish as time goes on, and we will recognize more and more. But everything is happening according to Bhagavan's will. In other words, it's all according to our destiny. So if we're to have money, it will somehow or other come to us. If we're not to have money, it will not come to us. Even if we strive to get money, if we're not destined to be rich, we will always be poor in spite of all our efforts to be rich. If we are destined to be rich, even if we give away all our money, if we're destined to be rich, more money will somehow come to us. So the more we go deep in this path, the more we become unconcerned about these things. Let money come or money go. It's all according to destiny. That is not our aim. Who is it who likes for money? Who is it who dislikes being devoid of money? Investigate that one. So naturally, all the things that were very important to us in the past will become less and less important. It doesn't mean they're totally unimportant, but they become less and less important. And finally, when ego is annihilated, everything becomes unimportant because what is alone remains.
The next question is, I have been advised in the past to focus more inwardly, but I find so many outward distractions. If one focuses directly on Bhagavan, can this help sadhana significantly?
Yes, certainly it can. But remember, Bhagavan, in our views, Bhagavan seems to be a person. But that is not the reality of Bhagavan. That is what Bhagavan is constantly teaching us is, I am not this body. What we actually are is not this body, it is that which is shining in our heart as I. That I, but is that pure awareness I, but is always shining in our heart. That is the true form of Bhagavan. So the outward form of Bhagavan appeared only to turn us back to this inner form. So if our mind is going outwards, it's good for it to dwell on Bhagavan, on his teachings and so on, rather than dwelling on any other things. But the outward form of Bhagavan and his teachings are a very great support to us in turning within, but they are not a substitute for turning within. That's why Bhagavan says, if you come, once we come if we've been caught in the glance of Guru's grace, we will surely be saved and never forsaken. But nevertheless, it's necessary for us to follow this path unfailingly. So we let us not give up even before we start. Let's not decide, oh, this turning within is too difficult, so let me not try. We need to continue trying, however difficult it may seem to be. In our effort to turn within, the outward form of Bhagavan and his teachings are a very great aid. So meditating on Bhagavan's form is certainly good, because Bhagavan, when we look at the eyes of Bhagavan, what are they telling us? Turn within, see who am I. That is, Bhagavan is the human embodiment of this path of self-investigation. Who am I? We cannot think of Ramana without thinking of who am I, because he is the very embodiment of this path of who am I. This is self-investigation, turning within. And regarding the advice to turn within, we need to clearly understand what turning within means in the context of Bhagavan's teaching, because inside and outside are relative terms. So in relative terms, the world is outside. All my thoughts and feelings and emotions, they're all inside. That's true in one perspective. But when Bhagavan talks about turning within, he's not telling us to turn within and look at all our thoughts and feelings and emotions and so on, because in a deeper sense, all these things are external to us. That is, the mind and all its thoughts, these are all extraneous to us. What is within is only I. All objects, all phenomena are external to us. All thoughts, feelings, everything is external to us. Even our vasanas are external to us. What is internal is only I. So looking within means looking at I. In Bhagavan's teachings. In other teachings, they may give a different interpretation to what is meant by looking within, but in Bhagavan's path, looking within means ahamukam, facing I alone.
We have 3 more questions.
Right.
The next one is, I don't understand how the dissolution of everything that has distinguishing features leads to happiness. When I think of the end of creation, it makes me very sad. Can you talk about this?
In whose view does creation exist? In whose view do all things with distinguishing characteristics exist? Only in the view of ego. We are perfectly happy every night when we fall asleep without any of these things, because ego is absent in sleep. All phenomena are absent. So everything dissolves in sleep. We have no problem with everything dissolving every night in sleep. Why should we have any problem with the permanent dissolution? When everything dissolves in sleep, we are perfectly happy. I don't think anyone complains about sleep. Oh, when I'm sleepy, I'm very miserable. I'm bored. I don't want this. No, we are all perfectly content in sleep. It's only when we rise in waking and dream, but the world looks so interesting, we go running after it. But when we are perfectly contented, perfectly happy in the absence of all these things in sleep. So why, when we are so happy in the absence of these things in sleep, why should we crave the permanent existence of these things? That is, creation happens every morning when we wake, or every time we begin to dream, or every time we wake up from sleep, whether into this dream or into any other dream. That is creation. But dissolution of creation is every night when we fall asleep. So it's happening every day. What we are seeking is not a temporary dissolution. Temporary dissolution is called manolaya. We are seeking the permanent dissolution. The permanent dissolution is manonasa. Permanent dissolution of mind is permanent happiness. Temporary dissolution of mind is temporary happiness. So take your pick. If you want temporary if you want temporary happiness, fall asleep. If you want permanent happiness, seek to dissolve the mind. How to dissolve the mind? Investigate who am I, and the mind will dissolve of its own accord. The reason we feel sad about that, thinking about that, is because of our attachment to it. So let's investigate the one to whom all this attachment, and as a consequence of our attachment, we have to suffer, because when we're attached to something, all this creation is ephemeral. Everything is changing. So if we're attached to anything, we're going to be disappointed, because what is there today will be gone tomorrow. So there's nothing permanent in this life except one thing. What is permanent is only I am. So if we want permanent happiness, if we want not to be disappointed, let us cling to what alone is permanent. That is I am. And if we cling to I am, then we'll be free of all sadness. Because I am is itself the infinite ocean of happiness in its pure form. I mean, I am in its pure form is the infinite ocean of happiness. And we can experience I am in its pure form only by clinging to self-attentiveness.
The next question is, in the book, The Collected Works of Ramana Maharshi, Spiritual Instruction, Chapter 2, Bhagavan is asked, can this path of inquiry be followed by all aspirants? To which he replies, this is suitable only for ripe souls. The rest should follow the different methods according to the state of their minds. Today you stated, and I paraphrase, that those who are drawn to Bhagavan's path are qualified to follow it, provided that they have a sincere desire to do so. I hope that it's not too much of a distorted quote. Is this correct?
Yes. I asked Natyanananda about this very quotation. Natyanananda is the one who recorded Upadesha Manjari. I asked him about this. When I began to ask him about this, he got very animated. And he said, I have no doubt about this. If you've come to Bhagavan, you're qualified for this path. Don't have any doubt about this. Don't have any doubt about this. And then I asked him more about that. Why did Bhagavan answer you in that way? He then explained to me. He said at that time, he was very new to Bhagavan's path, and he had a lot of doubt about his own fitness to follow this path. So he asked Bhagavan. Bhagavan could have told him, the very fact that you've come to this path means you're fit to follow it. Bhagavan could have said that, but he didn't. The reason he didn't, Bhagavan has a very, this is what Natyanananda explained to me, Bhagavan has a very subtle way of teaching. So Bhagavan wants us to arrive at our own understanding. So what Bhagavan said to me at that time, he said, no, this is fit only for those who are qualified. And then I asked him about other paths. Then he told me about those other paths. I wasn't attracted to any of those other paths. So I thought I want to follow only this path of self-investigation. But Bhagavan said this is only for mature souls. And I don't feel I'm a mature soul. That was what the thought that was in my mind. So that was troubling me. So I often asked Bhagavan about this. Then finally Bhagavan understood, but I still hadn't got the point. Then Bhagavan said, of all the paths, there are so many different paths are available, of all the paths, to which path is your mind attracted? And I replied, only to this path of self-investigation. Then Bhagavan said, then this path of self-investigation is the path meant for you. So that was what Bhagavan was indirectly telling him. That's what the conclusion Bhagavan wanted him to come to. When Bhagavan talked about the other paths, about pranayama and this and that and everything, it was to make him understand, but none of these paths appeal to him. What appeals to him is only self-investigation. But he was slow on the uptake, he said. So he and Natyanananda told me, anyone who is attracted to Bhagavan's path, they are fit for this path. I asked him, did you ask that did you ever ask Bhagavan who is fit for this? He said, no, I never asked this. I should have asked it when he first said that, but I asked the wrong question. I asked, what are the other paths? So Bhagavan answered accordingly. If I had asked, who is fit for this? He would say, anyone who's attracted, anyone who's drawn to this path is fit for this. But because I didn't ask, it took me some time to grasp the answer. And he said the reason he never asked it later was he had understood the answer. And he said, Bhagavan said on so many occasions to others who asked these questions, if you're drawn to this path, this is the path meant for you. The very fact that we are attracted to follow this path shows that we have a sufficient degree of maturity. So we, as Natyanananda said, have no doubt, as I say, he got very animated. He said, I have no doubt about this. If you're attracted to this path, you're fit for this path. So I hope that adequately answers that question.
Yes, thank you, Michael. That was my question. Thank you very much.
Right.
The last question is, so if the vasanas go with ego, is that memory as well? That is how people remember past lives.
No, vasanas are not memories. Often in many texts, they equate chittam. The chittam means the will. The totality of all the vasanas is chittam. Chittam is often equated with memory. That shows a lack of deep understanding. Memory is connected with the chittam. The will is the Anandamaya kosha. Memory is a function of the Manomaya kosha. So it's far grosser. That is, as far as memories of past lives are concerned, generally we don't have those memories. But just like now we can remember things in the past, sometimes by hypnotherapy or by yoga, or there are means to remember things from the past. But that is not to do with the vasanas. That is just like the memories we have now. They're impressions of things that we've experienced in the past. That's all. Just like perceptions are things that we are perceiving now. Memories are the impression left. That is perceptions. Things that we perceive now are present impressions. Those present impressions leave a mark on the mind, which we can sometimes recall. So we can remember what we did yesterday. We can remember we remember more about what we did yesterday than what we did a year ago. And we remember more about what we did a year ago than what we did 10 years ago. But we still have memories going back to our childhood. And if we want to remember past lives, there are means of doing so. But why should we be concerned about even our memories of this lifetime create so many unnecessary thoughts in our mind? By remembering past lives, there's no benefit. So these things may be possible, but like perceptions, like memories, like everything, they're all external to us. Even the vasanas themselves are external to us, and they're the subtlest of all the external things. So let's not be concerned about anything other than I. What we need to know is who am I, and not anything else. So who I was in this past life, in some past life, need not concern. We are not even the one we now take. We seem to be in this lifetime. In this lifetime, I seem to be Michael. That itself is ignorance. If I know in the past life I was John or Muhammad or Shiva or whatever, it doesn't serve any benefit remembering past lives. So, and it's a great blessing, but we forget our past lives.